Sam Whitelocks Offside, 2023 Rugby World Cup Final. You may think the biggest games in rugby are all about passion, grit, and glorious moments in history. But in this one, it was a whistle that did the final damage. With only a few minutes left in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final, the Springboks were holding onto a paper-thin 2-point lead like their lives depended on it. Tensions were so thick that every scrum, ruck, and tackle had the weight of a nation. And then came the moment that made jaws drop and fans curse at their TVs. The All Blacks were pushing hard, and Sam Whitelock, one of the most experienced players on the pitch, stepped into what looked like a defensive line you'd see 100 times in a match. But boom, the referee decided he had committed an offside offence. It wasn't a ruck that had fully formed, it wasn't a clear break in play, and yet the whistle pierced the tension like a sword. Handré Pollard, South Africa's boot wizard, lined up the penalty, and you could feel the collective panic in the All Blacks' body language. Pollard nailed it, 3 points, and just like that, history tilted in favour of the Springboks. The final score was 12-11, and that's how South Africa claimed a record-breaking 4th Rugby World Cup title. But was Whitelock really offside? That's the part that made rugby fans go nuclear. From living rooms to pubs to social media chaos, the debate raged on. The replay didn't exactly show what you would call an obvious penalty. Maybe his foot possibly strayed ahead, but what about his intent? No one really knows. Even former players on commentary couldn't agree. Some called it the right call under the letter of the law. Others said it was the wrong call under the spirit of the game. And that's exactly what makes it messy. A 1-point final, a split-second decision, and a legacy defined by a technicality. For the Boks, it was pure joy. For the All Blacks, pure heartbreak. For everyone else, a reminder that rugby isn't just played with muscle. It's decided with whistles, video reviews, and a whole lot of what-ifs. Speargate, 2005 Lions Tour. Alright, let's set the scene. It's the British and Irish Lions Tour of New Zealand in 2005. First test, first few minutes, and Brian O'Driscoll, the Lions captain, the Irish icon, is setting up for a big series. And then boom, he's suddenly airborne in the worst way possible. Tana Umaga and Kevin Mialamu decided to give him a warm Kiwi welcome by flipping him like a pancake. No joke, they literally picked him up, twisted him mid-air, and drove him headfirst into the ground. If you think that sounds like a wrestling move gone wrong, you'd be right, because that's exactly what it was. A full-blown spear tackle that led to a shoulder dislocation, loud screams, and medics sprinting like they were track and field athletes. And just like that, the tour was over for O'Driscoll. All within 90 seconds. Now here's where it gets criminal. The referee just stood there like someone waiting for a bus. For real, this guy was just there like nothing happened. No penalty, no card, not even a warning. You may think this is a joke, but it actually happened. The footage clearly showed the lift, the twist, and the slam. It was all there in HD. Yet the officials saw absolutely nothing wrong. Fans and pundits lost their minds. Even neutral viewers were stunned. Because there's dangerous, and then there's that should be illegal in every country, kind of dangerous, and yet not a single punishment was handed out. O'Driscoll left the field in a sling, while Umaga and Mialamu stayed on like it was just another ruck. The aftermath got heated. The Lions camp called it foul play. New Zealand media went on the defensive, and Umaga said it was accidental, sure, because flying judo throws are apparently part of New Zealand culture now. Regardless, the outrage led to a serious shake-up. World Rugby stepped in and changed the laws to protect players from future horror shows like this one. So yeah, it wasn't just a bad call, it was no call, and that silence spoke louder than any whistle ever could. Scotland versus Australia drama, 2015 World Cup. Now, do you want heartbreak? Do you want pure injustice on the world's biggest stage? Then welcome to the 2015 Rugby World Cup quarter-final between Scotland and Australia. This game had all the makings of a historic upset. Scotland had shown guts, fire and belief. They led 34-32 with just minutes to go. Fans in kilts were already dancing, and then came referee Craig Joubert to ruin everything. Australia had a line out, Scotland messed up a throw, the ball bounced around, and it was chaotic everywhere. And then boom, Joubert called offside on John Welsh. Nobody really saw what happened. It was like a magic trick. One moment you're leading, next thing you know, Bernard Foley is standing over a penalty 40 metres out. He slotted it with ease and it was game over. Australia 35, Scotland 34. But yet, here's where it gets nasty. Replays showed that the last person to touch the ball was actually Nick Phipps, an Aussie. The ball rebounded off him, so technically there was no offside, but Joubert blew it. literally and figuratively, and to make it worse, he ran off the pitch after the final whistle like someone who just stole a loaf of bread. He didn't shake hands, didn't stop to explain, he just vanished into the tunnel. The rugby world exploded. Scottish fans were furious, pundits called it disgraceful, and World Rugby had to step in and admit Joubert got it wrong. He should have awarded a scrum, not a disgraceful penalty that became a match winner. Reddit became a war zone. One fan said he knew he'd messed up and didn't have the guts to own it. Another said, running away is why I'll never forgive him. Yep, the rage was real, because this wasn't just a wrong call, it was a dream ripped out by a single whistle and a man in running shoes. To this day, ask any Scottish fan about that match and you'll hear one word: robbery. Bismarck du Plessis' red card. 2013, moving on to Eden Park, and it's South Africa versus New Zealand. But this isn't just another rugby match, this is war in shorts. Tensions were high, the tackles were flying, and before you could say, where's my money, Bismarck du Plessis lines up Dan Carter and absolutely flattens him. Now, to anyone with eyes, that was a clean, textbook, shoulder down, arms wrapped tackle. Legal by every definition in the book. Even Carter got up and didn't complain. But somehow referee Romain Poit had other ideas. Out comes the yellow card and everyone in the stadium goes quiet. You could literally hear South African fans inhaling confusion. The commentators were lost for words, and even the All Blacks bench looked stunned. The TMO gave Poit a chance to backtrack, to check his own homework, but Poit stuck to his guns and handed Bismarck a yellow for what can only be described as nothing. So what happens next? Second half rolls around, Bismarck comes back on, and minutes later gets penalised again. This time for a raised elbow while trying to fend off Liam Messam. That one may be questionable, maybe not, but 2 yellows make a red. So South Africa are down to 14 men, and suddenly it's an uphill climb. The match ends 29-15 in favour of New Zealand, but nobody's talking about the scoreboard. All the headlines were screaming about the red card and the silly referee. Rugby Twitter exploded. Fans weren't just angry, they were in shock. People were genuinely asking if the laws of physics had changed mid-game. Then came the bombshell. World Rugby released a statement admitting Poit made the wrong call and that the tackle on Carter should never have been punished. It was one of those calls so bad that it brought together both sets of fans. Even Kiwis said, yeah, that was a bit dodgy. South Africans were angry, and Romain Poit became public enemy number 1 in Johannesburg. Memes started flying, and Reddit threads piled up with quotes like, the TMO told him it was clean. He just ignored it like it was background noise. And let's be honest, you don't see referees doubling down on wrong calls too often, especially when the entire rugby world is telling them, mate, you messed this one up. To make matters worse, that match was pivotal in the Rugby Championship standings. It wasn't just a game, it had title implications, and South Africa didn't just lose a match, they lost momentum and confidence. So yeah, in case you thought referees didn't influence games much, ask Bismarck du Plessis. Or better yet, ask Dan Carter. He probably still owes Bismarck a beer for getting tackled so cleanly it broke the laws of rugby logic. Wayne Barnes' forward pass miss, 2007 World Cup quarter-final. So guys, let's rewind to 2007. It's France versus New Zealand in the World Cup quarter-finals. Now, if you know anything about All Black Rugby, you know these guys do not get knocked out in quarter-finals. They're like final bosses. And yet, here they were, fighting for their lives in Cardiff against a French team that looked like it had borrowed magic from the universe. The game was tight, tense, and you could feel the pressure pouring off the players like steam. Then came the moment that still lives rent-free in the minds of every New Zealand fan. Damien Trail gets the ball and clearly throws it forward to Freddie Muckalak. Freddie takes it and charges through like he's sprinting to cash a lottery ticket. France scores, and referee Wayne Barnes watches it happen. But guess what? The ref doesn't even blink. He just lets it roll. Now, here's where it gets painful. That pass was forward. Not just a little bit forward, not maybe sort of slightly forward. We're talking full on, 100% NASA trajectory forward. The kind of pass that belongs in American football. The kind of pass that breaks the sacred laws of rugby and makes forwards everywhere cry into their protein shakes. Everyone saw it. Commentators screamed it live. Fans in the stadium lost their minds. People watching from their couches around the world stood up and yelled at their TVs. But Barnes, silent. No whistle. No TMO check. No nothing. The game carried on like that forward pass was part of the script. The All Blacks ended up losing 20-18, and just like that, their World Cup campaign died with a crooked pass and a blind eye, and you better believe New Zealand hasn't forgotten. To this day, Wayne Barnes is a sore subject. He could walk into a pub in Wellington and get booed before he even orders a pint. What made it worse is that Barnes was a young ref at the time. It was his first World Cup, so you may think that would earn him some sympathy. But nope, all it did was fuel the fire. People questioned why he was even assigned such a high-stakes match in the first place. Surprisingly, Barnes went on to become one of the most respected referees in the sport. He even got praised later in his career for owning up to his mistakes and improving. But for a long time, that forward pass was his legacy, and nothing else mattered. But it's not just New Zealanders who remember. Even French fans will admit they got away with one that day. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a moment that changed the trajectory of a tournament. And let's be honest, if the shoe were on the other foot, French fans would have stormed the Eiffel Tower in protest. So yeah, if you want to know how one pass can shatter dreams, ask any All Blacks fan what happened in 2007. But maybe don't say the words Wayne Barnes unless you're ready to hear a truckload of curses. Mark Cueto's try. 2007 World Cup final. Now if you're English, look away, because this one will make your blood boil even years later. The 2007 Rugby World Cup final between England and South Africa wasn't exactly a thriller filled with tries and fireworks. It was a grind that saw South Africa take the early lead through penalties, and England desperately needed a moment of magic. Then came the 42nd minute. Matthew Tate danced through the Bok defence like a man possessed. He was dragged down just shy of the try line, but the momentum was there. From the breakdown, the ball flew out wide to Mark Cueto, who dived toward the corner like his life depended on it. He reached, he grounded, and the England bench exploded. It looked good, but hang on. The referee, Nigel Owens, sent it upstairs to the TMO, Stuart Dickinson. And this, my friend, is where the chaos began. Replay after replay, slow motion, zooms, and every single pixel got analysed. Everyone waited and waited. And then came the call, no try. Cueto's foot had just scraped the touchline, apparently, milliseconds before grounding the ball. But here's where it gets interesting. That try would have brought England within 2 points of South Africa with momentum on their side. Instead, they were awarded a penalty for an earlier infringement, kicked for 3, and the game never really turned again. South Africa calmly kept the scoreboard ticking and ran out 15-6 winners. You may think, all right, fair play if the foot was really out, but here's what people still argue about. First, the TMO used a frame rate that many say wasn't precise enough to show the actual moment of contact. Second, some analysts believe Cueto's foot hovered above the line, not on it. And third, that entire review took ages, which usually means there isn't clear evidence to overturn the on-field call, but that's exactly what they did. Even Cueto himself said years later, I still think it was a try. And honestly, so do plenty of fans and pundits. It didn't just decide a match, it may have decided a legacy. That single foot made all the difference between possibly back-to-back World Cup titles or a what could have been tale that still lingers in England's rugby soul. The third test, British and Irish Lions, 2017 tour. Have you ever watched a match where even the referee seems confused? That's exactly what happened in the third test between the All Blacks and the British and Irish Lions in 2017. This was a series tied at 1-1 and tensions couldn't be higher. New Zealand was on the front foot. Then came the moment everyone still debates. The clock was in the final minutes. Liam Williams dropped a high ball under pressure. It bounced awkwardly and Ken Owens instinctively caught it while clearly in an offside position. And in an instant, referee Romain Poit points straight to the posts, penalty. The All Blacks were moments away from glory, and everyone assumed that was it. But hang on, Sam Warburton, cool as ever, walks over and has a word. Poit nods. The TMO gets involved. More replays. Then, brace yourself, Poit changes his mind. He downgrades it from a penalty to a scrum. And just like that, a penalty worth 3 easy points turned into a deadlock reset. Nobody could believe it, and that wasn't just any penalty, that was a potential match winner in the dying moments of a historic tour. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or boo. The All Blacks looked stunned. The Lions celebrated like they'd just scored a try, and the game ended in a draw. The series ended 1-1, and the debates never ended. But here's where it gets funny. Poit later admitted he might have made the wrong call after reviewing the footage. World Rugby stood behind him, but fans weren't having it. Owens didn't make a deliberate play, sure, but he was offside, and in any other game, that's a penalty every day of the week. You may think one whistle shouldn't carry that much weight, but when it's the final whistle of a test series between two of the biggest forces in world rugby, trust me, it does. That call didn't just deny New Zealand a win, it handed the Lions a share of the series. It was a moral victory for some and a dodged bullet for others. Either way, Romain Poit went from villain to hero to question mark in about 90 seconds. What a roller coaster. Paddy O'Brien's Mayhem, 1999 Rugby World Cup. Let's take a time machine back to the 9th of October, 1999. The location, none other than Twickenham, London. It's Fiji versus France at the Rugby World Cup, and on paper, France was the favourite. On the field though, Fiji came out swinging like they had no interest in playing second fiddle. Their offloads were clean, their breaks were electric, and the energy was absolutely wild. You could feel the belief building. They weren't just surviving, they were taking the game to the French with fire in their boots. Then it happened. Fiji was deep in the French half. A ruck formed, the ball bounced loose, and flanker Koli Sawabu pounced like a hawk. He flicked it wide, and in came winger Villemoni Delasau flying down the wing. He grounded the ball with what looked like textbook precision, but hold on. Paddy O'Brien, the New Zealand referee in charge, wasn't feeling the same joy. He blew the whistle and called it back as a no try. Even the stadium paused. You could almost hear a collective, "What?" Sadly, the replays on the screen didn't help him. They showed a clean scoop and no obvious knock-on. Confused Fijian players looked around like someone had pressed the wrong button on reality. But O'Brien wasn't done. In the very next few phases, France threw a couple of forward passes that even your grandma would have flagged, yet not a peep from the whistle. Fans started shouting. Commentators sounded baffled. Then, as if to cap off the chaos, O'Brien awarded France a penalty try after a scrum collapse that barely lasted more than a second. No warning, no reset, no dominant push, just arm out, whistle blown, and 7 points to France, just like that. The game eventually ended 28-19 in France's favour, but that score doesn't tell the full story. The Fijians walked off like a team who had just been mugged in broad daylight. And to be honest, they kind of were. The turning point wasn't a French comeback. It was a referee who simply couldn't keep control of the biggest match of the tournament for Fiji. Years later, Paddy O'Brien himself admitted the game got away from him. And in case you're wondering, that's the ref basically saying, "I messed up badly." It's not often a top official confesses to dropping the ball like that, but this was no ordinary collapse. This was a series of decisions that left a team's World Cup dreams buried under confusion and frustration. To this day, rugby fans in Fiji and beyond still bring it up, on forums, in pubs, anywhere old matches are dissected. And honestly, who can blame them? Because that wasn't just a missed try, that was a masterclass in how not to referee a World Cup match. Sam Warburtons Red Card, 2011 Rugby World Cup semi-final. Alright, so it's the 15th of October 2011 at Eden Park in Auckland. It was the Rugby World Cup semi-final between Wales and France, and the Welsh fans were singing their lungs out. As for the French, they were plotting revenge, and in the middle of all that was Sam Warburton, 23 years old, fearless, and wearing the captain's armband like he was born with it. Wales had bulldozed through the tournament with real bite. They were young, confident, and full of belief. But then, everything flipped. In the 18th minute, Vincent Clerc, France's elusive winger, got the ball and darted down the sideline. Warburton came charging in, wrapped him up, and lifted him. Now, lifting a player in rugby isn't illegal by itself, but when the tackle tips the player past horizontal and drops him awkwardly or dangerously, referees start reaching for their pockets, which is exactly what Alain Roland did. Without blinking, red card, Warburton was out, and Wales were down to 14. There was pure silence, followed by 60 minutes of rugby heartbreak, and then came the outrage. Warren Gatland nearly blew a gasket on the sideline. Players looked confused, fans were furious, and Roland didn't even check with the TMO, he just went straight for red, like it was sitting there preloaded in his hand. Pundits lost it, social media went wild, even non-Welsh commentators like Francois Pienaar said it ruined the game. Many insisted it was a yellow at best. Some said it wasn't even that. But here's the twist. Just a week before, the International Rugby Board had issued a stern warning. Tip tackles should be red. End of story. Roland, who once played for Ireland and was no stranger to pressure, followed that directive to the letter. Warburton later admitted he didn't intend to cause harm and accepted the ban, but also said he didn't think it was a red in the spirit of the game. He got slapped with a 3-week suspension. Wales lost the match 9-8, and just like that, their dream went poof. Roland never backed down. He said he'd do the exact same thing again, and that emotion had no place in refereeing. But let's be honest, That one call didn't just change a game, it flipped the entire tournament. It left a sour taste. And to this day, if you walk into any Welsh pub and whisper, Warburton Red, someone will buy you a pint just to rant for 20 minutes straight. Pascal Gozair blunder, 2021 Six Nations. Alright, let's talk about one of the most chaotic refereeing performances in modern Six Nations history. Wales versus England at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff on 27th February 2021. You might have tuned in expecting a classic rivalry clash full of fast breaks, flying tackles, and maybe a few handbags. But what you probably didn't expect was referee Pascal Gozair becoming the most talked about man on the field. This game had it all. Brilliant tries, huge momentum swings, and two major referee decisions that left England fans frothing at the mouth. Now, controversy number one? It came when Welsh winger Lewis Rees-Zammit chased a high ball that he appeared to fumble forward with his hand. As he went to the ground, the ball hit his leg and bounced backwards. Liam Williams swooped in, scooped it up, and sprinted under the posts for a try. Now listen, everyone and their grandma thought it was a knock-on. Even the Welsh commentators hesitated. The English players pleaded. And Rees-Zammit, he stood there like someone had just told him, Dragons are real. His face said it all. He couldn't believe it either. But after checking with the TMO, Gozair ruled that because the ball went backwards off Rees-Zammit's leg after it hit his hand, the play could continue. Technically, maybe. But was it controversial? Absolutely. And that wasn't even the end of the drama. The second and far more baffling moment came when England's captain, Owen Farrell, was instructed by Gozair to huddle up and speak to his players after a penalty. Everyone assumed play would restart only after Farrell returned, but nope. While the English were still regrouping, Dan Biggar looked over, asked if time was on, and Gozair gave him the nod. Biggar then launched a perfect crossfield kick to Josh Adams, who caught it untouched and dotted down for a try, while England stood frozen. It was pure outrage. England fans were screaming foul play. Farrell looked like he'd just been conned in a street magic show, and Gozair had essentially given permission to ambush a team that hadn't been given a proper chance to reset. After the dust settled, World Rugby came out and confirmed that Gozair had got it wrong on both major incidents. And just a few months later, the French referee quietly stepped away from international duties. No farewell tour, no final whistle moment, just a quiet exit after one of the most talked about matches in recent memory. So guys, which of these referee calls will you say is the worst? Tell us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, there's plenty more rugby videos in the works. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.